Well, first Holmes was born, then he got fat, bald, and tired. Sup, Holmes?
Beware your host, Jonathan Holmes.
Traumatizing as always, Sinistar. Thank you for introducing me. I am Jonathan Holmes, and this is Erin Reynolds. She has joined us on the show as a last-minute request. Thanks so much, Erin. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. How are you doing this fine day?
I'm doing great. We have a very exciting week ahead of us. We're running a Kickstarter, as I'm sure we'll talk about, and it's been very busy, but I'm super jazzed and super pumped, so I'm doing great.
I've been watching that Kickstarter, and I think it's gone up by like at least $20,000 in the past. I think when I first heard about it was almost a week ago, and it's gone up by a lot since then. How's that been to watch?
Exciting. You know, the fun thing with Kickstarter is you never know what to expect. It's pretty unpredictable, and we've had a really great week this past week, and they say that the final week of a Kickstarter is really when a lot of the magic happens, so we're already starting to see that. So it's been quite a ride and really exciting, and of course we're super thrilled to see all the new people coming in supporting the project and getting that much closer to the goal.
And the game's called Nevermind. It's for PC. It is a interesting take on horror and also encouragement of self-regulation. We'll get into that in a second. Was it also on Indiegogo at one point? Or
yes.
Another thing?
We've actually run 2 Indiegogo campaigns in the past, each for different phases of the project. It started as my master's thesis, and the first one was to help us finish the academic version of it. We were in the final months of development, and we needed additional funds to purchase sensors, because those kind of add up after a while and kind of get to the final stretch to finish the proof of concept. And then we ran it again several months after that to help us spread the word about it, submit it to festivals, send sensors to press and influencers so they get a taste of the game. And that was great. And now we're in the final stage of making it happen, making it something that's fully releasable that everyone can enjoy. And we're running a much larger Kickstarter campaign to fund that effort. So it's been great.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying it's been great. We've gotten such wonderful support throughout. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
And is there a version of the game out there now that some people outside of the Nevermind, Flying Mollusk is the name of your studio, is that correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah, correct. Outside of Flying Mollusk, are there people who have played the game and given you feedback about it?
Oh yeah, so we currently have what we're calling a polished proof of concept. It's the academic version of the game. It's my master's thesis. And it's one fully working level. The biofeedback works, the narrative works. You get a really good taste of what Nevermind can be. And without getting too much into the narrative, each level is a different patient whose subconscious you go into. So we have one patient that you can explore. And so yeah, we've definitely shared that with several people. We've gotten some really great feedback from game industry people, academics, medical communities. It's been great to kind of watch them play it and see the vision behind it. That's really what we're going to be planning to build on and expand further with the next phase.
How long have you been working on the game total?
We spent, about 1 full year on the current version. The concept started in spring of 2011, and we had one academic year to develop it with a full student team of computer scientists and composers and a little bit of everything. And then, I graduated in 2012, and the team scattered to the wind. I took another job, actually, right after that in the industry and took a break from it, although during that time, Nevermind kept living. It kept getting momentum. People were getting excited about it. It was going to festivals, and so seeing people get as excited about it as I always has been was so encouraging and validating, and it's really where my heart was all along. So I left that job in September to return to it full time, and that's what I'm doing now and been doing the last couple of months.
Wow, that's quite an adventure. The game has really stuck with you. We should talk a little bit more about what it is. It is a first-person horror game, and you mentioned sensors earlier. It is a game that reads your heart rate. Is that correct? And adjusts the game as your heart rate changes.
Exactly. Yeah, we call it a biofeedback enhanced horror adventure game, which is really a long way of saying that it's a game where you wear a biofeedback monitor. Right now we use the Garmin cardio chest strap, which you can get off the shelf. You can get everything you need actually on Amazon for under $100. It is constantly reading how scared and stressed you're getting while you're subjecting yourself to the horrors of the game. And it does this by, the sensor reads your heart rate, but the game interprets heart rate variability. So it's not the rate of beats, but the cadence of beats, which is a great way to tell how anxious you're becoming. And when you do get more scared, you do get more stressed out, it becomes harder and more punishing. So in order to beat the game, you need to learn how to place yourself in these creepy scenarios and learn how to manage your stress on the fly. Otherwise, the game will just keep getting in your way and not letting you progress until you learn how to chill out.
One of the things that, because I have always loved that concept, I was one of the few people I knew at E3 a few years ago when Nintendo announced that they had a vitality sensor. I'm sure people have brought that up to you many times. And I also happen to know that Nintendo more or less owns the right to the Fatal Frame series, which is one of my favorite horror series about really leaving you in a powerless situation. And I was all excited for the kind of creepiness you can get from that, and also being forced. And I think there's been a few games for the Wii. I have to remember. It might even be Fatal Frame 2 Remake in Europe. There's a haunted house mode that checks how much you're like jittering the Wii remote. It might have been the Grudge game. I really like horror games, so I'm really excited about your game. But none of them have actually attached to your heart and strength like that. And I was always worried that once that kind of game eventually happened, that people would just end up cheating it. That they would, look at a picture of a kitten or something while they were playing the game and just stare at it with the game on pause and then go back to it. So is that something you've had to look out for, ways to really make it a genuine experience where the game isn't getting any sort of fake reads on the person's level of anxiety, that it's a genuine relationship there between the game and the player?
Yeah, I mean, we've had promising results in all the play tests we've done where people can see the correlation of, oh man, I did get freaked out there and I saw the game respond. With Nevermind, I mean, if they want to cheat by looking at a picture of a kitten, that actually, in our mind, is a win because they're learning whatever calms them down. So if looking at a picture of a kitten in Nevermind calms them down rapidly, then maybe they'll know to put a picture of a kitten on their car dashboard when they get stressed when driving, because it's really all about learning stress management in the virtual world of Nevermind and using those same skills that will hopefully become habit by the time you've played the game out in the real world. So Nevermind, it might be you're wrestling with this really awful, horrific car mangled maze, and in the real world it might be the moment before you go into a job interview. The skills that you use in both are identical in many ways, and so again, if looking at a kitten is what takes you to your happy place, then by all means, that's awesome.
Oh, interesting. So it really sounds like in some ways you're helping the player and engaging with them in a way where they're going to come out hopefully with some practical real-life skills after playing the game, more so than the desired effect of just trying to scare them. You're almost putting the player before yourself in a lot of ways from the sounds of it.
Exactly. I mean, our first goal was to make a really fun, kick-ass game that people are going to want to play, but our other goal was to, not only make it an entertaining experience, but something that gives back to the player as well and makes them, braver and stronger, for having played the game. So those were really kind of our two focuses in making Nevermind.
Are there games you've played at any point in your life? And I do want to, it's tough. There's so many directions I want to go in at the same time. I want to talk about where you got the idea and what's driving you to make games that are really putting the player first before yourself as a developer. Also, I wanted to know, there's so much I could talk about. I'm so excited. So, but to start with, so people know a little bit about your background, are there games that influenced you at any point in your life growing up that made you, A, want to make horror games? And I've seen some of your drawings on your it reminds me of past Sub Holmes guest Mariel Cartwright. I don't know if you've ever met her or heard of her. A very intelligent, calm, empathetic, good-natured person. She draws women with their intestines hanging out, with their brains exploding and stuff like that. So your drawings are very creepy and fun. Is that something you've always liked in terms of, have you always been drawn to horror in various ways?
Yeah, even since I was a little kid, my favorite movies were Ghostbusters and Gremlins. I've always sort of had an affinity for the horror genre and the horror aesthetic and a creepy art style. I was an X-Files fanatic growing up, and I think a lot of that still has a lot of influence in it. So absolutely. In fact, that was when I wanted to make Nevermind. It was for my thesis project, where you have an opportunity to make any game you want, basically. It's your dream project. So I knew that I wanted to do something with biofeedback. I knew I wanted to do something with positive games, and I knew I wanted to make a horror game because I hadn't yet, and I've been itching to make a horror game, throughout my career. So I wanted to use that as the opportunity to finally dive into it.
Are there any horror games growing up that you felt both were scary and effective, and also that maybe by getting through them, you felt like you had learned how to cope with anxiety or stress? It's one of the things about the psychology of horror movies. It doesn't totally make sense to a lot of people, because they're like, why do you want to feel uncomfortable when you watch a movie? But when you get through it, you often feel like you've accomplished something, and that real life maybe isn't going to be as scary to you if you manage to get through the difficult experience of a film. So are games that have done that for you as well?
Yeah, I think, like, just to kind of go back to the point of, subjecting yourself to horror games and horror films, I think there's something really cathartic about subjecting yourself to an experience that makes you push beyond your comfort zone, and forces you to be braver in a very safe setting, which is really brilliant in many ways. I'm trying to think, like, I played a lot of horror games. The one that I think is near and dear to my heart is Eternal Darkness. I just love that because it's a horror game, but it also is so creative and so clever and beautiful in many ways that I think it combines a lot of just really amazing elements to come together into this very unique, one-of-a-kind type of game. One frustration that I've always had with horror games, though, is that they're so punishing. So there's a lot that, like, I've gotten like a quarter of the way through, and then I just can't progress. And I'm a pretty seasoned gamer, but it's so punishing that I never really get to see the whole thing, which bums me out. So with Nevermind, actually, we focused less on, like, the twitch mechanics, the jump scares, the monsters coming at you and you're dying every 5 seconds, and more on puzzle solving and focusing the challenge more on wrestling with your own fears, so that anyone can play it, whether you're a seasoned gamer or you're a new gamer. You don't have to worry about learning how to hack away the goblins and ghouls. You can just play the game and experience the whole thing if you want.
I do want to hack away goblins and ghouls now. That sounds fun. Maybe in the sequel.
Exactly.
What is the threat then in the game? You feel threatened by your environment. You feel, I presume, pressured to get through the puzzles in time. But is there something overarching that has you having that fear of death or fear of failure throughout Nevermind?
Yeah, we play a lot with the uncanny and sort of dark, twisted, surreal atmosphere, so the environment is just really creepy. It gets under your skin, kind of the way that, like, David Lynch movies or Cronenberg movies, kind of do that. So we don't have, as I said, monsters jumping out at you. So really the threat is just that sense of tension in the pit of your stomach. Like, I know there's something awful behind that door, something really weird and messed up, and I'm going to have to open it if, I want to get to the next step and see what happens next. And then, that's where the stress reaction comes in. You start to feel anxious, and then the environment starts attacking you, and you have to resolve that on the fly. So, like, one of my favorite examples is there's this kitchen part of the level where you're solving puzzles, and if you get stressed, it starts to flood with milk, and that becomes the threat, because if you stay in the flood of milk for too long, then you drown. And in Nevermind, you don't really get a game over in terms of, like, you die and have to start over. It just takes you out of that scenario, puts you in a calmer area of the level where you can regroup and catch your breath and then pick up where you left off before.
That's great. That's actually something I'm seeing at least one other indie game developer work on, is this idea that death in a horror game, in a way, it can be counterproductive because it leads to you just going back into the exact same situation, and it's less scary the second time, even less scary the third time. I'm blanking on the name of his game. It's such a wonderful game, too. It's got ends in it. It's got a Edward Gorey art style. He was on Kickstarter.
Oh, Neverending Nightmare.
Yeah, Neverending Nightmares.
Yeah,
thank you. I interacted with the developer of it and everything. He's a very nice guy. But in that game, from what I know, when you die, you just end up in another bad situation that's different than the one you were in, because you're in a nightmare, so you're not technically dying. Your mind is shifting around. So yeah, a brilliant idea. Excited to see how it's all going to work out. What are you guessing the length of the game would be if someone were to play through it from beginning to end for the first time. If you had to guess, what is your idea that what would you want to have happen in terms of length?
Yeah, well, the current version takes people about 45 to 60 minutes to play through it, depending on how quickly they solve the puzzles. And it's very modular. Again, each level is a different trauma patient. You know, we could, you know, if we have 3 levels, you know, expect about like an hour per patient. But, you know, so people can spend, you know, if we build the game to the extent that we're hoping to, based on the Kickstarter goals, we see it to be about like a 5 to 10 hour game or so. And then again, that can be expanded or contracted. There's a lot of flexibility with the scope there.
Quick tangent, while I have it fresh in my mind. What are your thoughts on the idea of the way that consumers today value video games in terms of length and in terms of mechanics? Because I worry about a game like Nevermind, because I'm a worrier, like we talked before the show. That's why they call me Whiskers. That consumers are going to be like, oh, it needed to be 20 hours and have like a deep combat system, or else it wasn't going to be worth it to me. I feel like there's so much consumer value that is almost similar to the way they value like buying a product, like buying a car or something. And for me, it would be much better for everyone if we started approaching games more like the way we approach food. And if you buy like a rare, very well cooked but small steak for you know, $12, it might be better than buying a bunch of White Castle burgers, which is what a lot of other games might be, because they're meant to appeal to everybody and meant to have mass market saturation in that way. So any thoughts on that? I'm curious about it as I'm getting to know you.
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot, you know, especially as you know, I'm a gamer, and my needs and kind of what I look for in a game have really changed, you know, just kind of, you know, as I grow up. And I think, you know, different types of people are getting to be gamers now, which is great, which means that they're going to have different needs. I'm sure there are many people out there who want the long, deep gameplay experience, and that's awesome. But there's a lot of people out there who maybe just don't have the time to invest in that. You know, I know for me, the reason I got into game development is because I love playing games, but now I'm so busy making games that I just don't have the time to play anything that's, you know, long. You know, the last game that I beat from start to finish, well, maybe not the last game, but like Journey, for example, was a really great length for me. You know, like I could get into it, I was immersed, and I was able to finish it by the time I, you know, didn't forget how it started. So I think that, you know, it's good to have more variety. I think, you know, now that digital distribution is such a accepted and well-used thing, that episodic content lends itself really well to kind of creating that scalable experience. So if you want to have the 20-hour experience, great. If you want to have the 1-hour experience, no problem. You know, both work. And yeah, I agree that, you know, I think if a game is a well-concentrated art piece, it shouldn't be devalued, you know, compared to a game that's, you know, 20 hours long. You know, it just depends on, you know, yeah, is it the quality of the experience or the, you know, what people are looking for.
Sure. In reviewing so many games, I've had to really question whether my readers are going to have values that match my own and really express my values in a way that would make sense to them. And one of the things I've tried to say is that if a 3-hour game is something you're going to be thinking about for 30 years, then it's worth the 3 hours. Whereas if a 20-hour game goes in and out and you forget it ever even existed, then it wouldn't be worth the time necessarily. So hopefully other people agree with me on that, and hopefully games that are shorter but more memorable will find an audience that values them, as I think is happening, like you mentioned with Journey. I'm so glad to see that game get the press it did. So, when did you start this whole video games thing? Do you remember when you first started playing them?
When I first started playing them, I think I first got a taste of them. Gosh, I had a friend who had an Atari system. I think her dad had an Atari system, and so I would go over to her house more often than not just to kind of watch her dad play video games with her, because I was so mesmerized by it and so intrigued. And you know, I think, you know, ever since my parents got me a Game Boy for Christmas, it was just all over then. You know, I moved around a lot growing up, and in many ways my Game Boy was like my only friend. It was the one constant that I had with me, and I spent so much time playing that, and then, you know, Nintendo and Genesis, and just kind of, you know, I was just fascinated by games. I didn't really realize that you could make a job doing that until a little bit later. But it's, it has always been a big part of who I am and a big part of my life.
Huh? Any particular games that stuck out with you in a particular way growing up, particularly?
Yeah, there there are a lot. Probably the one that I like to cite the most is Echo the Dolphin. That one had a big impact on me, both when I played it, which I'll get into in a second, but also later on in my career. Echo, and I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Oh, sure.
Okay, good. It's like this crazy, like, this game where you play as a dolphin and you're fighting space aliens that abducted your pod. It's this ridiculous concept. It's amazing, but ridiculous, right? But I was so immersed and so engaged by the world that it placed me in, and by kind of exploring this deep sea and everything dolphins, that I couldn't get enough of learning more about that space. And I just became ravenous for learning about dolphins and whales, and kind of, I just wanted to learn more and be more of a part of it. In fact, I almost became a marine biologist because I was so inspired by Echo the Dolphin. And it was later on in my career that I realized that games do have this power to take you into a world and give you a perspective that you wouldn't have otherwise, and make you give context for things that maybe didn't seem relevant or interesting before. And so, if a game like Echo could inspire me to be a marine biologist, just think of what else games can do. And that's really kind of where I started focusing a lot on positive games that are really fun to play, but also either inspire or help or teach people, while they're having fun.
Huh? Have you talked to the creator of Echo the Dolphin? His first name is Ed.
Yeah, I pinged him a while ago just to kind of send him, from one game developer to another, thank you for making this amazing piece of art. A while back. I'm sure he's super busy, so, but yeah. I hope to, be able to meet him one day in person and just kind of let him know that, it was a big moment for me. I love that game.
Introduce you to him. That's great. Yeah, I know him a little bit on Twitter. He's going to end up on this show eventually. I hope so.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah. He's in a strange place in his career where and there's a lot of developers like this we're kind of in the first era of video games where you could have, there's musical artists that had hits in the 80s who still feel as fresh and vibrant as they are now, but finding their fit again in the current game culture in terms of what's considered marketable and cool and whatever. It's so different than it was back then. The values have changed so much that they can't quite find their place, but they're on the cusp of it, and I really hope that he does, because he's still got a lot of worthwhile things. And Seaman! I want Seaman back!
Right! I know! When the Nintendo DS came out, or the 3DS even, I was like, this is perfect for Seaman! I can't wait for them to remake it, and I'm still waiting for that to happen. I love that game so much.
The creator of Seaman has one game on the 3DS. It's called Aereo Porter. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I haven't. Is it
weird.
Awesome? Yeah?
It's not awesome. I love it, but I have to be perfectly clear, it is not awesome in any way. Though it is a little bit awe-inspiring that it got made. He was like, want to know what it's like to have a boring, stressful job? Aerial porter. You have to sort the luggage. If you do bad, then you're fired. And that's all you do, you sort luggage.
Well, I can see it's like Papers, Please, where on paper that doesn't sound like, it's like, yeah, you're looking at people wanting to emigrate into your country, but it's so fun and addictive, it's great.
It's stressful and genuinely stressful.
Yeah.
I do like Aereo Porter a lot, but it didn't have that same level of surrealism. And it's tough because, that Seaman did, and it's tough because he got sort of punished for being so weird with Seaman, and then Seaman 2 never came out here, and he continued he also did a game called Odama, which is a pinball game. I
remember that. Yep.
He was so weird all the time, and he didn't end up becoming a big hit, so who could blame him for trying to do something normal just to try and stay in business? But I hope he gets back to Seaman, and we should get back to you. Sorry, I came to a tangent every once in a while. So you liked video games growing up, you liked Echo the Dolphin. How did you end up actually moving towards working in the industry?
So I moved out to Los Angeles when I started undergrad. I knew I wanted to. I decided marine biology maybe wasn't a good fit for me. I knew I wanted to do something that combined art and technology. And at that time, Pixar was really getting to be big. And so I was like, 3D animation, this is perfect. That's exactly what I want to do. So I moved out, started at USC. I was in their fine arts program as an undergrad. and studied animation and realized pretty quickly that I sucked at animation. Like, I couldn't put together a walk cycle if my life depended on it. So I was like, all right, well, maybe that didn't work out. What else can I do? And I got involved with visual effects and realized that, well, you know, I at that point we were visiting a lot of like visual effects studios, but also video game studios. And I realized, oh man, like video game studios, that's a job? Holy crap, like I could, yes, I've been playing games all my life. I would love to do that. And so I got involved with concept art and started, you know, doing concept art for student projects and had an internship at Disney where I did that. And my last year at USC was when a lot of the games programs started to really blossom. And I took a class in which I was a game designer, and that's when it sort of all clicked that, you know, game design is my happy spot. That's where I want to be. That's where everything comes together for me. And then I went on to you know, go out into the industry as a game designer, and it was kind of, took it from there.
Awesome. And I remember reading in the email that you sent when I asked you to tell me about things you've done. You were a concept artist on the original version of Epic Mickey for Disney. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah. So the internship that I took at Disney as a concept artist was part of their Think Tank program. It's the first year they're offering it, which should be known as the coolest job you can ever have, where you get to be in a room with amazingly talented and creative students. There were about, I think, 8 of us. And we were in charge of coming up with new ideas for Disney games. And so they came to us and said, guys, we have a task for you. We need you guys to make Mickey Mouse cool again. And so that's awesome. And we got to research you know, everything about Disney animation and Mickey and the Imagineering library and just kind of immerse ourselves in that. And so we came up with the basic narrative, the basic concept. I did a lot of the environmental concepts and pitch it to the big men at Disney and you know, got the green light on it, and then it kind of went from there. So that was a super cool project to be in, and what a fantastic experience early on, you know, to learn from.
That's did any of the environments that you helped devise end up in the final game?
No, I mean, it was so early on at that point that you know, I think it maybe kind of inspired it a little bit, but I think really, you know, then Junction Point eventually took it over, and they took it to their own direction and did great things with it. So nothing really specifically from my work, but at least, you know, I'm just happy that I had a hand in kind of helping propel that forward.
Oh, sure, absolutely. What can you tell me a little bit about where Epic Mickey was at a concept, at least in your mind and the minds of the people that were helping to pitch it at that time as students? What was it going to be like then?
You know, it's still going to be let's see. I mean, it was so long ago.
Sure.
It had a little bit of a darker spin, I think. You know, I think there was some early concept art that was shown way back in the day, and back then it was sort of kind of going in that direction. And then, you know, that transitioned over. The internship was about 3 months, so, you know, I went back to school about the time when they were talking about next steps. So.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Huh. So, did you see any of the other art? Did anyone else? Because if you were on environments, you wouldn't have been the one to come up with the animatronic scorpion bear, were you?
No, alas, I love the animatronic scorpion bear, though. I hope that makes its way somewhere somehow, because that was great.
Yeah. I was on the press tour. They flew me out to Disney actually for Epic Mickey, and I met Warren Spector and was very uncomfortable because I don't know if you've ever been to Disneyland.
Oh yeah.
Have you ever been alone?
I have not, but I can imagine that might be a little creepy.
If you want a new level for Nevermind, I can tell you all about my 3 days Disneyland alone, and I didn't know how to operate the televisions, so all I could get is the channel that has a woman pretending to be Snow White being like, "Oh, I feel so afraid," with like so much makeup on, and then like a man dressed as a bear just shows up. It's like, "I am gonna get you." Just alone in a hotel room watching this, and I had no money. I was watching families love each other totally by myself. I could only afford to eat boiled broccoli. While everyone else was eating hamburgers. That's a whole other story. So you interned and you got a taste of that side of game development, and then you graduated. Well, how did you actually end up getting paid work in the industry?
Yeah, so I went back to Disney after I graduated, this time as a game designer, and it was actually back to the Think Tank program again, although in between it had evolved, so it was very different from when I was in it before, and just as much fun. And then went on to be, an associate producer of game design, and then game designer, at both their publishing studio, Disney Interactive, as well as one of the development studios, Fall Line Studio, which was fantastic and a great experience, and I really loved it. But I was in the middle of wrapping up my project at Fall Line and started thinking about positive games, and at that point in time, games were starting to really go through a lot of changes. This is when the iPhone just came out and social gaming was just starting, and serious games were getting to be a topic of discussion, and games for health, games for change, like all of these fringe areas of game development started to really kind of come into their own. And so that's when I knew I wanted to go back to graduate school to kind of study what all that was about, and really immerse myself into learning more about positive games and figuring out how can I make more of these games that inspire people and help people.
I very much look forward to getting into your definition of positive games and other positive games, and the whole idea of games, because to me, when you put a disclaimer before a word, it usually implies that unless you put that disclaimer, it would be implied that the opposite meaning was true. So like constructive criticism, well, most criticism is kind of mean-spirited and negative, or low-fat ice cream. It's just most ice cream is. So positive game kind of implies that a lot of games are negative. And being in this industry, at least on the press side, for 7 or so years, I have noticed it's something I took for granted, but more and more lately, I've noticed that so many games and so many people that are attracted to games and talk about them, it's a culture of destructivity a lot of the time. So many games are about destroying things, and so many of the most popular people who talk about video games are very critical and mean-spirited about, tearing people apart and tearing apart their games and being very. There's a whole lot of embracing of the strength that comes from tearing something down. And then I see these other developers on the other side of things. They're like, hey, maybe we can build people up a little and make them feel a little better. And one of the last ones we had on this show, who's really, that's his life mission, Vander Caballero, he worked on Army of Two. He's worked on, but now he's doing Papa-Io, and I think his new game is called Silent Enemy, which is about being bullied. He's trying very, very hard to, give people soul-feeding exercises, games where they're not focusing on breaking anything, but rather building something. And then you have Minecraft, which a lot of people play that and they don't break a thing, and it's all about what they can build, and it's been shown to be so appealing. So I have the feeling that this direction is going to pay off, but a lot of the people who are trying to do it right now feel kind of out in the cold because the culture at large isn't trained to know that this is something that they're going to enjoy. The big money marketers aren't saying, here's a hot new game about, self-improvement, other than We Fit, which was kind of a, flash in the pan, so to speak. So, so when you were deciding to approach this idea of making games that were going to be positive, what did you guess your challenges would be towards getting people to accept that and to understand that that's something that would be worthwhile to them?
Yeah, I mean, to go back to kind of the point of positive games, kind of opposites, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard that before, and that's a cool way of looking at it, although I think hopefully we'll get to the point where the positive won't be needed, because I actually don't think that games in and of themselves are. I think more often than not, games are generally positive because they put you in these different scenarios, give you different challenges, make you think in different ways. Like, for example, like Echo the Dolphin, you wouldn't really classify that as a game for good necessarily. You wouldn't see that listed under any serious games list. But for me, it had a great impact, And I think there's a lot of other games out there that can, maybe SimCity sometimes gets used in like educational context, but that's another example of one that's really fun, really successful. And it teaches you, kind of what goes into running a city, and it's maybe not as easy as you think, which is really cool. And so I think one of the challenges that I saw going into it when I started to focus on positive games is how can we make games that seem just as sexy as any other game out there, but you you give it a little bit of a oomph, a little something more to kind of help the player. And I call it putting cheese on the broccoli. You know, it's not a didactic game, because I think in the past a lot of these games for good have been very didactic, or they've been interactive textbooks. They try too hard to make them good, and so no one wants to play it. And if no one wants to play it, then it's not going to do anyone good. So how can we make games that are really fun? Like Nevermind, for example, is very edgy. You wouldn't give it to your 5-year-old kid as an educational product. It's built to be a scary, fun horror game. But it also has this other component. And I think more and more we're going to see more games like that as developers start to say, hey, we can do more with games. We can make the world a better place using our craft. I think we're going to see more kind of these games that are perfectly fun and awesome in and of themselves, but also have this other component to them.
Yeah, I hope so. It makes sense, especially as more adults embrace video games, not as just something that they secretly do, but as something that they talk about in mixed company. That, oh yeah, I spent the weekend playing video games. Growing up, that's something that I would never hear an adult do unless they felt like they were in a safe space where they weren't going to be mocked and ridiculed and considered a man-child or what have you. Because that's been culture, but like you were saying with phone gaming and a lot of other things have kind of broadened people's idea. I know so many people that play video games for hours a day that would never admit to being a gamer or even liking video games because they still have that stigma hanging over their head. But that generation hopefully is on the way out, and a new generation's on the way in where it's thought that adults are going to play video games, but what video games are they going to play? And
right.
Adults are tuned to be productive because we feel like we're going to die. At least I do. So what am I going to do while I still can? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry. I got excited about something. Oh, okay.
Oh, please do. Yeah.
I was going to say, because, exactly, and I think that goes back to the time issue as well, because a lot of these adults who have limited time, and in the day and before they die, they want to multitask, too. When every microsecond is precious, I think people look to games, one, to have fun, but also, and this is where the positive games, I think, can be very, strictly from a business standpoint, very lucrative and successful, is they also want to improve themselves. Like, for me, I played a ton of Dance Dance Revolution, probably more than I would be comfortable admitting to. And it was because, in part, it's a really fun game, and I got a lot of satisfaction and enjoyment out of it, but also I could rationalize it by, hey, I'm exercising, I'm burning a ton of calories. Look at that calorie counter there. That means that I have just spent the last 5 hours doing something good for me. And I think people are hungry for those experiences. You look at how many people have Fitbits and fuel bands and all that. I think people are really looking for technology to not only entertain them, but to also help them out. And I think, these positive games are just a great way to kind of combine both those goals, especially for the older, time-pressed audience like ourselves.
Time-pressed because they don't... I feel badly about myself if I think, well, I could have tried to work on all these projects, all these irons I have in the fire, all these people I could have been in contact with who are very healthy for me to be in touch with, but instead I just played a video game for 6 hours. I would end up feeling, for whatever reason, like I wasted that day. Mm-hmm. Even if the game was really good, I could rationalize it to a degree, but if that game were something that I knew were trying to teach me how to deal with anxiety better, I wouldn't feel half as badly about it by the end of it. So
exactly.
Makes a lot of sense. Where do I go now? There's so much I could talk about. Have you played, just real quick, I can't help but give in to my the obsession with Rhythm Heaven Fever. Have you played Rhythm Heaven Fever?
Is that the new one that came? I played Rhythm Tengoku, and that's one of my favorite ones. Is Rhythm Heaven the US one that came out a few years ago, or is this a new one? Rhythm Heaven,
what was it called in the United States? On the DS, it was called Rhythm Heaven Gold. But I think they just call it Rhythm Heaven here. On the Wii, it was Rhythm Heaven Fever. That's my game for dealing with stress.
Right.
That's when I, just so for an idea of what somebody like myself is already playing in order to meditate and deal with anxiety, that's it. Because it's just one button. But if you're stressed, you're going to lose the rhythm. And if you lose the rhythm, then you're going to get more stressed and you're going to lose some more. And I'm like obsessed with getting perfects in that game. So I have to bring myself to a point where I'm not bored. I'm not so relaxed that I'm bored because then I'll lose the rhythm. But I'm still engaged, like fully engaged in the moment, not worrying about the future, not like second guessing myself in the moment, but just in there. And then when I pull off a perfect, it's like the greatest reward. And I feel like, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, it just brings you in your flow state. That's awesome. It's so great about those games, and like I feel the same way. Like Rhythm Tengoku is one of my favorite games. You know, and it's really old school because I think it's not even for the DS. It's for like the old Game Boy.
Yeah, the first one's Game Boy Advance Japan only.
Yeah, yeah. But it's like it's just so silly and just so much fun because it is so simple. You know, you don't have to really think about much, and you're pulling hairs off of an onion's chin. How awesome is that? You know.
Oh, wow. You really have played the first Rhythm Tengoku. It's a great game. You should, if you have the chance, check out the Wii one at some point.
I've played it a little. It's fantastic, and it's on my list of things to pick up. I should.
Right after you're finished making your epic pro, your positive, that you've been working on for 3 years now?
Yeah, well, yeah, actively for 2012, and then not actively. Since without the development team, there's only so much you can do. So it's been it's something I've been thinking about, dreaming about for 3 years.
So much commitment to that concept. It brings me back to a question I meant to ask before about when you did get out of school, and sounds like you rose up the ranks a bit in being a developer. What did it take, you think, to beat out other people that might have wanted the same positions that you did, but you ended up rising up to the point of game designer pretty quickly out of school? So what was it that you needed to do in order to accomplish that?
Yeah, it's I think part of it is I was in the right place at the right time. I can't say that it was all me. Luck plays a lot into it, and I had a lot of really supportive people who I was very fortunate to be in contact with, who kind of mentored me through it, and that helped a lot. A lot of it's just a lot of hard work too. It's game development is a lot of fun. I love it, and I feel so privileged and fortunate to be able to say that I make games for a living. If I went back and told my 8-year-old self that, I think she would just freak out, and I still do freak out when it hits me. But it takes a lot of work to do. It's like I have never worked a 40-hour work week. I usually work 10, 12 hours a day and on weekends, and it just takes a lot of work to kind of make game development happen and game design work. And I think that's part of it. I'm not, I don't know if that's all of it, but definitely it's just you gotta learn, you gotta make mistakes, you gotta try new things, and constantly be learning and growing.
Sure, and retaining that commitment, it sounds like. That's something it sounds like you've had as a skill for a while. You were so committed to Echo the Dolphin, you were going to be a marine biologist, for goodness sakes. That's really saying something. So a couple of other things I had floating around in my head while you were talking before. You said you wouldn't want to give Nevermind to like a 5-year-old, but how do you think you would have liked Nevermind at around the age that you were playing, or watching Gremlins and Ghostbusters? How do you think it would have affected you?
Yeah, I think because Nevermind really deals with a lot of very mature adult themes. Just to give a quick aside, just to give some narrative context for it, you are a neuroprober. When you play Nevermind, you're like a psychologist of the future, basically, and you go inside the subconscious mind of extreme psychological trauma victims. These are people who experience something really terrible at some point in their life, so awful that their conscious mind can't remember what happened to them. It just can't deal with it, and so they forget the event completely, but their subconscious mind still knows something wrong had happened, and the fragments of the memory are twisting and churning, and that's actually based on what can happen in real life when someone experiences a very impactful traumatic moment. And just like in real life, in Nevermind, you have to help the patient come to terms with what happened. You need to confront them with the memory, with the event, and work with them through therapy to help them take ownership over it and kind of take the steps towards resolution. So Nevermind, you go inside the subconscious to piece together those fragmented memories, uncover the mystery of what the trauma was. You're exploring, in the environment, there's clues everywhere. It's very Myst-like in many ways, in that you're, it's very environmental, clues everywhere, puzzles everywhere, and eventually you'll get all the pieces you need to reconstruct that memory. And because it deals with psychological trauma, because it's very surreal and abstract, a lot of the themes I think would probably go over the head of sort of people under a certain age. It's very dark and it's very complex and complicated. So I think if 5-year-old me or 8-year-old me played it, I think, I just probably wouldn't get a lot of it. A lot of it would be lost on me. But that being said, though, the goal of using biofeedback to help people become more mindful of their stress reactions and learn how to better manage it, that I think could be something that would be beneficial for a younger audience. So as part of the next steps for Nevermind, we're really interested in not only expanding the game as it currently stands, but also working with professionals to make individual specific levels that are more targeted towards certain audiences, whether it's people who are dealing with specific psychiatric issues such as PTSD or anxiety disorders, or younger audiences like children. Like, we could make a level that is appropriate for younger audiences, and in fact I would really like to do that. And we can still kind of keep the creepiness, but just keep it thematically a little more appropriate for different ages.
Wow, that's great. And as I told you a little bit before the show started, I've been working with people who suffer from a variety of psychiatric illnesses for a long time, so I can speak to how anxious you can become when you're trying to help somebody. And that sounds, now that you've described the game more deeply, that's the first thought that comes to my head, is that when playing Nevermind, I would probably be afraid of finding out how terrible this other person's life was, and like, how am I going to be able to help them without letting my emotions get the best of me and just being as freaked out as they are. Instead, I need to stay strong for their behalf. So the stake at risk there is my patient going to be okay?
Exactly.
Jeez.
Exactly.
It's like you made the game out of my 9-to-5 life for the past 10 years or so since I first started in the field. Working with people with post-traumatic stress, one of the things I've noticed is that oftentimes they've been trained to see the world by their trauma, if it was childhood trauma, as having to isolate right away who is a victim, who is a potential victimizer or threat, and who is going to protect me in this thing. And when I heard that Nevermind might be dealing with people with post-traumatic stress, that I immediately was flooded with all these armchair developer ideas of things I wanted to tell you about that I've heard people say with post-traumatic stress, where they felt so afraid of becoming a victimizer. One of the great metaphors I heard was that I felt like everywhere I stepped I had to make sure I didn't crush a baby's head, because I was so afraid of hurting other people, because that's the way someone with post-traumatic stress might be trained to feel, as though the world is all victims, victimizers, and protectors, and they definitely don't want to become someone as bad as the people that were bad to them. And oftentimes with them, part of my job is helping them to get out of that power dynamic in their own head, because it's never going to lead to any real balance where everyone in your world is either a protector, a victim, or a victimizer. It's such an imbalanced power dynamic. Sorry, my tangent. It just happened. What do you think of my tangent?
It's interesting. I mean, I don't have a background in psychology, but I've always had a deep interest in it, and so Nevermind's been a great opportunity for me to speak to people like you who have experience in this realm and really learn from it. And one of the things as a game developer, game designer, and an artist that I really appreciate the chance of having to do is finding a way to express some of those feelings people have. Like, everywhere I walk is, I'm afraid I might crush a baby's head. In a game, in a surreal game, you can actually manifest that to kind of help communicate to other people how this might feel. Because I think part of it is, people who are going through that, seeing kind of that expressed in sort of a tangible, virtual way. But also, I think the other part of it, and this is one of my other goals with Nevermind, is to kind of show other people who don't experience that what it's like, to humanize that and bring them into that world and make them more aware of it. Because I think, there's a lot of misconception around PTSD and psychological trauma. I think people have maybe a small understanding about it, but only a tiny, narrow sliver of what it is and what it's actually like. And so I kind of want to open that world. It's like, yes, people soldiers from war can suffer from PTSD and sexual assault. That's something where there's a lot of trauma, and I think there's some awareness around that, but it can be also so much more. Like, psychological trauma can come from so many variety of places, as I'm sure you know, and so kind of saying, like, you don't know what's going on in the other person in the other person's head. You don't know what other people have been through, and this is a little bit of kind of what it's like, just to kind of raise that awareness and empathy. So it's been great to kind of be able to talk to people, like you, who can kind of give that insight so that I can make a game experience that represents it, hopefully in a way that is helpful for people.
Absolutely. And from what I've seen of the game, I've only gotten to watch video of it so far, but the focus on changing how dirty and dark the world is a perfect fit, because so many people who suffer from trauma, they feel powerless, and filth is really an expression of powerless. There's stuff on me that I can't get off. I am being tainted by just my world, and I can't just be my natural, clean self. The dirtiness, great job. Also, the deformation of the human face and how you see a face and you want to relate to it, but you no longer can. You may, or faces are even just objects often in your game. Another very nice choice I thought that you made, because when you've been traumatized, you're looking for a human connection so often, but there's a block between your ability to feel close to people anymore, because you never know where danger is going to happen. You're constantly in a sense of fear flight. So you see a face, but you don't feel anything anymore. You feel like dead and loss of ability to empathize. And those faces are so creepy in your game, with the open mouths that look like they're almost doors. But if you get swallowed by a door, isn't that becoming food and therefore being victimized by somebody else? Like those such threatening, cold-faced door heads you made.
Thank you.
Makes me feel troubled. Good job.
Good. That's the idea. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. I really look forward to seeing more of it. The problem with a game that deals with any sort of psychiatric illness or mental illness is, I feel like people, especially if they haven't been in the field for a long time, the language we have in games for mental illness and psychiatric illness is usually that of a lot of cliches of the ill person being dangerous, or them having sort of, I don't know, there's this thing about, and you mentioned Eternal Darkness earlier. I was really fascinated with that game at the time because it made being mentally ill almost what was scarier than the monsters. Like, people have this real fear of mental illness, and that fear is something that I think a lot of people can relate to, but at the same time, it's the fine line where you don't want to say, well, mentally ill people are scary. You might want to say that things people have been through are scary. So how's it been for you to walk that particular line? Is that something you've been conscious of while you've been working on the game?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good question. It's funny because Nevermind takes place sort of in a psychiatric clinic, like so many other horror games do, but it's also very different because, you're helping the patients. And, I think it was always really important to me that we never treat the patients in Nevermind as the enemy. You're helping these people, not only as the neuroprober, the doctor who is in charge of helping this person, but also as a player, when you go inside their subconscious mind, you're experiencing their memories in the first person of the patient. So you are put in the shoes of that person. And again, it's to help hopefully build more empathy, around what these people experienced. They may be having trouble in their life with their jobs, their relationships and stuff, but it's because this crazy stuff happened that they don't even remember, and most people wouldn't realize. And so it's in a way, like, I want the message in some ways being like, don't judge a book by its cover. It's not always as easy as you seem, and hopefully that comes through in Nevermind, and not in a exploitative way, in a way that kind of connects to the actual issues and the actual therapeutic understanding around those issues.
Sure. I'm desperate now to play your game and win, and make everyone's brain just like clean and happy inside. Like, I'm picturing a win state for Nevermind just being like the Care Bears meets My Little Pony. Like, everyone feels great inside the brain.
That sounds pretty creepy too, though.
Yeah, that's a good point. No matter what, depends on how it's done. What are some other positive games that you've worked on in the past? Was there a game that really led you to feel like this is a direction that you were confident moving in for some time?
Yeah, one of the first games I worked on when I started at USC, it was actually a suite of 3 games for health. These games had been selected prior to when I started there by Humana Inc. They wanted to fund them to be developed and as a way to encourage younger audiences to develop healthy habits in a fun way. And because I had experience in game development already, you know, I had worked at Disney prior to coming back to USC for my graduate degree. And because I had this interest in positive games, they put me in charge of sort of being the executive producer, you know, kind of the lead designer on a lot of them. And one of those games was a game called Trainer, in which you are given a creature to take care of, similar to Pokemon in many ways, where you have this creature and you know you put them in battles, you know, to you know, wrestle and have fun, and you want to raise those stats so that you can win those battles. So like, oh man, my jackalope needs to be faster if he's going to beat this rhinoceros. And so, you know, what do I do to raise the speed stat? Oh, I have to run in place for 30 seconds. The catch with it is that you need to exercise with the creature, otherwise it's going to be like, yeah, I'm not doing this, dude, if you're not doing this. And so, you know, it's actually where we first got into biofeedback, where I first started playing with it, because we needed to find a way to hold the player accountable to exercising with their creature. And so we tried a number of biofeedback options. None of them really worked. The technology wasn't quite there yet at the time to be easily integrated into a game engine. We ended up using a webcam to do motion tracking, and that ended up working really well for that game. And in fact, actually, Trainer went on to win 2 prizes at Michelle Obama's Apps for Healthy Kids competition, which was really cool because we got to fly out to the White House and you know, meet the other people making these games for health. And then we won first place in the student games category, as well as first place in the games category overall, which is fantastic. Because when you start a game, the last thing you expect is to end up in the White House
Yeah.
you know, with it,
Wow.
which is great because that also shows that, you know, there are a lot of other people out there who are interested in the potential for games for health and games for change, and that's really cool in and of itself. And then, of course, you know, after having experimented with biofeedback and Trainer, you know, I couldn't help but think of all the potential there and all the possibilities there, especially in the games for good, games for health realm. And so 2 years later, when I started working on Nevermind, I knew that was something I definitely wanted to experiment with again. And at that point in time, the technology had evolved enough that I was pretty confident we would make it work, which we did, which is awesome.
Can I get Trainer? Where do I get, not to, Nevermind, obviously I'm excited about that, but Trainer sounds totally awesome.
Yeah, I think it's online somewhere. I'll send you the link. I don't remember the URL off the top of my head, but I'm sure also if you just Google Trainer USC, you might be able to find it.
So is it like a commercially sold or available app, or is it just kind of a student hidden project?
Yeah, it's sort of a student hidden project. We've talked about, yeah.
That stinks. That would be such I feel like, because for me, you know, fight or flight can get me going. I think it can get most people going. A lot of video games, the basic motivation is fight or flight. You know, kill these guys before they kill you or run away from the guys, which is great. But empathy is where so many people are hoping to bring games next, and we've talked about empathy a lot today, and Nevermind seems like it combines empathy motivation with fight or flight motivation in a brilliant way. But Trainer, if I can care about a fat little rabbit that I want to win in life, then I'll get myself in shape if that's what it takes. Whereas for me, I honestly, you know, maybe don't care about my health as much as I should, and I think a lot of people tend to forget about themselves, but they can care about.
Uh-oh, I think I lost you.
Hi, am I here?
Oh, hello?
Hi.
There, sorry, I think I lost you there.
Oh, yeah, it's not your fault. So, yeah, I was ranting about how Trainer sounds so great. Is there any way you can put that out? Do you own that? Who has that?
I think, so it was a student team developed project, and so I think, you know, it's one of the team members has it hosted on his website right now. And it's just out there online, and you can create an account and play it, and it's pretty accessible. You know, it's something that we always wanted to develop further and kind of get out there in the world and really study it in many ways. but we just haven't been able to yet.
Well, sure,
but
you've
I
been
still
doing a
haven't.
million different things.
Yeah, but I still have hope for it. It's definitely something I'm hoping that we can return to at some point because it was a fun game to make, and I think there's a lot of potential there as well. Especially
Sure.
now with the biofeedback tech, it kind of works perfectly. It all comes full circle.
Yeah. It's funny how ideas sometimes they can be bigger than what the tech is ready for at the time, but eventually, as long as you hold on to them, they can still come together. I wonder how it would be if it was just. Oh, I shouldn't do that motion on video. If you're holding a thing, because there's so many motion-sensitive things, phones, controllers these days. Just about every controller can sense motion on some level. PS4, Wii Remote. I wonder how it would work with that tech. Yeah,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of possibilities there, and of course, like the Kinect is
Oh,
super
exactly.
awesome.
Sure.
Because not only do you have the motion detection there, but now you have the biofeedback component of it too. So I'm so excited about all the potential there for both, Trainer and Nevermind, of course, and just biofeedback and games in general. It's so exciting.
Yeah, you might make a Kinect game people want to play. That's something. There's one other person making one, Swery65, who made Deadly Premonitions, making a Kinect game that looks really good. But sadly, it's not that risk I was talking about before of making a positive game. It seems like so many developers are afraid to put something out that maybe the audience doesn't already know that they want. They want to feed the audience what the audience has been told that they like to eat, and that's kind of more of the same. Like so far, next generation of games on consoles anyway feels very much like the last, and hopefully that'll change. Things like Kinect, there's so much potential there. People just use it. Questions came in. Do you want to take some questions? Is there something? Okay,
Sure.
good. And we can always get back to other things if we have time. Monopologist asks, outside of the heart monitoring, is there any other feedback the system is using to determine your stress level? Maybe it means like taking your pH balance or something along those lines.
That's a good question. Actually, there is. So Nevermind, while the sensor, of course, helps with the biofeedback component of it and makes it more immersive, it's still fully playable without the sensor. And what we do, if you're playing it without the sensors, we'll approximate how stressed or scared the player's getting based on things like mouse movement and button pressing, with the idea that if you're button mashing, you're getting more frustrated, you're getting more anxious. It's a system we have in the current version, the proof of concept, and it's one that we're definitely planning to expand and explore more moving forward, just so that we can get it as close to having the sensor as we possibly can, so that anyone can play Nevermind and hopefully have a similar experience with or without the sensor. And then beyond that, we don't take any other biometrics aside from heart rate right now. But again, moving forward, we're going to look into a lot of other kinds of sensors, so that hopefully it's as compatible with as many sensor types out there as possible, and just kind of taking the technology further.
Yeah, people should back that Kickstarter. I should have been telling them that the whole show. Back that Kickstarter, guys. People are nervous, of course, that it has a ways to go in the last 5 days or so. If you don't make it on this one, God forbid, I hate to be negative, but anything's possible. Actually, before I ask that, because that's kind of an obvious question, less obvious one, have you been in touch with PewDiePie about your game?
Yep, so that's a great question. Because we have a lot of really cool things planned for the last 4 days of the campaign, and in fact we have been in touch with PewDiePie, and we've sent him a sensor, so hopefully we'll be seeing something from him very soon with that. The sensor got a little caught up in US to UK customs, but I think everything is good now, so yes, we're so excited about that, and really looking forward to seeing him play through it.
He is the master of being afraid. So that would be perfect. So if it doesn't work out, God forbid, will that be the end of Nevermind, or do you feel like, and it's so hard to decide these things in advance, but do you at least feel like you would be able to regroup and replan, and maybe its time would come again in the future? What do you think would happen?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're so focused on the Kickstarter that we've of course considered all the possibilities. I mean, anything can happen, especially in the final few days. That we haven't given extensive energy to next steps if it doesn't get funded. But that being said, we're determined that we'll find a way to make it work. I'm very passionate about it, and the team is really passionate about it, and I think we'll find a way to get it out there. With the Kickstarter too, whether or not we make it, every pledge is really important because not only does it get us closer to the goal and is critical to hitting that goal, which of course would be amazing in the ideal case scenario, if we don't make it for whatever reason, even being able to show those numbers to the traditional funding sources for games, saying, look at all these people who want to see this made. There's a lot of people out there who are really excited about it, who believe in it, kind of helping them feel more confident, the potential funders for the next steps, that, this is a really cool project that has a lot of people interested in it, will help a lot. So really, like, if every pledge, every backer really counts a lot for the next steps, no matter what happens with the Kickstarter.
Good to know. And 75,000, at least last time I checked, hopefully it's gone up since then, is a really impressive
this morning.
number.
Yeah.
Really? Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
That is fantastic. $80,000 of anyone's money for any cause is pretty incredible. And I wonder, I think Sony would love the game. Sony is all about getting those kinds of games exclusive to their consoles. Microsoft, they need to look good. People are making fun of them all the time lately. Because the Xbox One, such a petty thing, though. I mean, all the consoles are great. They all play great video games. I don't know why we tend to get so nasty.
I think it's in our DNA. It's the whole Nintendo Sega thing. I remember that being the big debate. So I think it's fun, but and I mean, both consoles are so early on too that I think we'll see more games coming for in the future.
I expect they're all going to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they'll all get there. Even the Wii U, I think, will do fine. More or less, though I don't know if anything's going to hit PS2 or Wii numbers anymore. So much is about PC these days,
right?
And
Steam,
mobile. And mobile. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. We'll see. Speaking of nasty, I really thought that Fox News guy was kind of a jerk to you, frankly. How was that for you, talking to him? You, of course, don't need to substantiate my negative opinion of that man, but how was that interview for you?
Yeah, I think it definitely came off as being a little dismissive. The hardest part of that interview was the fact that I actually couldn't see his face while I was talking to him. I just had an earpiece in, and I was looking at like a camera and then like a smiley face sticky note under that. And so I couldn't tell if he was joking or if he was serious. But I from what I've seen of his show in the past and from talking to people who religiously watch it, they all said that he has a bit of a wry sense of humor and he likes kind of getting a rise out of his guests. So I went into it knowing that what to expect, and I just assumed that he was just having fun, and so it was kind of too bad because I felt like we didn't get a chance to talk about some of the most interesting parts of Nevermind as a result. But it was still fun, and I appreciated the opportunity to be on the show, and it's always leave them wanting more. So
I think you came out great on that, and if anything, the juxtaposition of him being, to me, such a jerk made you all the more interesting and kind of the hero of the conflict that was happening. It was amazing how how willing he is to just be terrible to people, is what I was thinking. To look at the guest you invited on your show. Like, imagine if I invited you on the show and you told me, yeah, I want to be positive. I want these games to help people. I went, come on, Erin. You don't want to help anyone. Like, what kind of interviewer does that? But he doesn't, and he's on TV, so he must know what he's talking about. XKevX, no, he doesn't know what he's talking about. XKevX said, you mentioned that this game requires peripherals. I can never say that word. 37 years old, I still can't talk. To be played. Will it be a challenge to get some people to be willing to take such a financial plunge to play a single game? How are you dealing with this hurdle? You talked a little bit earlier about how it takes about $100 to get the sensors that you need to play Nevermind. That's not a small amount, but it's not a large amount either. It's kind of right in there. The Wii balance board managed to sell at $100 it sold for about $100, and they sold millions of those, so it's certainly been done. But how has that been to approach that challenge, and what have your thoughts been to try to let people know that it's going to be worth it?
Yeah, well, I mean, we went into it also with the offline mode, without the sensor, basically, in mind as well. So you can play it without the peripherals if you want. And again, we have mechanics in there that approximate your stress levels based on mouse movement and keyboard presses. So so the peripheral is not required to play it, which we hope helps kind of get more people playing it than they would otherwise. Moving forward, though, as I said, we're planning to look into lots of other sensor types. So hopefully you don't have to even buy an extra sensor. You can use one that you already have, whether it's the Garmin heart rate strap or some other. I mean, it seems like everyone has a wearable device nowadays, and so hopefully you can just use one that you use for other things. And don't need to make the additional purchase. And finally, we're looking into technology that would eliminate the need for a peripheral at all, like the Xbox and the Kinect 2.0, which can, you just sit down on your couch and play Nevermind like any other game and still have the biofeedback experience, which is so cool, as well as other technology that lets you have a similar experience. So we're looking into ways of making it even easier and cheaper and than it is now to get that experience.
If Nintendo had done the vitality sensor, and they were like, we want it to be an exclusive, how tempting would that have been for you, you think?
To do an exclusive with Nintendo?
Yeah. Pros and cons, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because, who knows?
Sure.
There's a lot of variables that go into that.
Yeah.
I was bummed out when I had to come to terms with that the vitality sensor probably isn't going to happen, because I was really looking forward to that, and I knew Silent Hill was thinking about using it, and I mean, obviously I'm a big believer in biofeedback in games. I think it's going to be a huge next step in game development, and it's going to be something that we're all going to expect in 5 years down the road. So it's too bad that never happened, because who knows what kind of games we'd be making and playing nowadays if it had, but that's okay, it's still happening, I think
Sure.
We're going to see it more and more, so, it's, it gives us a little bit more time to kind of figure it all out, I guess, which is a good thing.
That's right. It's just a matter of time, probably. It was a bummer that it didn't come out. It was announced right at a time when Nintendo's street cred was kind of at its lowest, unfortunately. I think if it had come out maybe a little bit before, a little bit after, they could have maybe salvaged their reputation on that. I'm just guessing, of course, that's part of why they never moved forward with it, because there was a lot of negativity around it. Nintendo just wants you to be healthy. They don't care about you having fun, people were saying. They were all grumpy.
I heard, too, that they wanted it to be like 100% reliable, and it was like 96% or something. I'm not sure if those were the exact numbers, but it's something around there. Like, it was really close, but not all there, which, I think, people ask, like, does the sensor in Nevermind, is that, like, is it 100% reliable? It's like, it's pretty reliable, especially for games. I think a lot of the tech we have out there now is very sensitive and very accurate. Would I want a doctor, making surgical diagnoses about me, based on it? Maybe not, but that's fine, because it's a video game. It's like you're not doing open heart surgery. So, that's, again, like, I was bummed out when I saw that, but who knows?
Sure. And in Japan, at least last time I was there, 2010, love testers were like everywhere. Like, everyone just wanted to test how they felt about other people, or just felt in general based on that kind of stuff. So there's a huge audience in Japan potentially waiting for Nevermind as well. I can't remember if there's Oculus Rift compatibility with Nevermind, potentially.
Yeah, we're super huge fans of the Oculus Rift, and we're definitely hoping to bring Nevermind to it. I think it'll make the experience that much more immersive, and I just kind of wanted to, for my own personal benefit, port it there. So it's a stretch goal currently for the Kickstarter. It'll take a little bit more investment to do it right, and we want to make sure that if we do it right. We have someone on the team who has expertise in stereoscopic 3D worlds immersion, so we want to be able to, make sure that the experience is as rich as it can be, which takes a little bit more time and investment. But we're really, really excited about that opportunity, and are really hoping that we're able to do that.
We should talk a little bit about the team. How was the team formed? Who's on the team? How big is your team? That sort of thing.
So, as I said, when after 2012, a lot of the original development team went on to do their own thing. Some people, like me, graduated and started jobs elsewhere. Some people had another semester, a year left of school, and then they, went to do their own thing. I'm hoping to bring as many of the original team back onto the development team as possible. Right now, I'm the only full-time person on it, and I have two people, one industry veteran who's helping out part-time, and another one who I went to school with, who has this amazing background in experimental games and immersion. And they've been helping me out part-time. And we're looking forward to bringing them on full-time, along with the development team, as well as some other industry veterans who are really excited about joining the team as soon as we get the funding to make that happen. And you know, kind of have this rockstar elite core but tight team too. We want to keep it as small as possible so we can be as agile as possible. And yeah, I'm really excited about kind of getting the band back together and making awesome happen.
Ah, that's great. Yeah, it is hard, and especially the more people you get in, the more complicated it can get. But it sounds like you've got at this point already so much experience with these things. Pretty incredible to be this young in your career and already have so much under your belt. Speaks to well, yeah, it's great to hear about. And you worked at Zynga as well, if I remember correctly. How was working at Zynga, and what did you work on there?
So, so after I graduated and you know finished Nevermind, I went to Zynga and was on Zynga Poker, which is definitely a change. And I get a lot of raised eyebrows when I say that I went to Zynga afterwards. But you know, one of the things that really attracted me to Zynga was the people. When I went there to interview, everyone I met was just awesome, industry rock stars. It was like being at the Game Developers Conference. You couldn't walk down a hall without running into someone who worked on your favorite game, and that's huge. There's so much to learn from, and just so many great people.
I hate to stop you, but can you give me any details on that? Who are some people there? Because they don't, or are you not allowed to?
Well, like for example, Wright Bagwell, who was on the Death Space team, works there. And that's amazing. It's like, wow, this is someone who worked on a pretty mainstream horror game and is now at Zynga. That's super cool. And like a number of other people that I mean, there's just like too many to name, but
sure.
But yeah, and they're all like super nice and super creative and energetic. I really like that energy. And then the other side of it too was the Zynga.org division, which is a whole part of Zynga that's focused on taking the amazing power that Zynga has, all of their user bases and their games that have this great following, and doing good with it, which is exactly in line with what I'm interested in. And so, I worked closely with them, and we actually made this one feature of poker that I'm really proud of, where people were able to basically contribute some of their winnings from the poker game towards this goal. And the original idea was if we hit this goal within a certain amount of time, we would donate, I think, $50,000 to charity water. And, we put that feature in. We didn't really know how people were going to respond. Charity is kind of always like, well, it feels good, but are people really going to want to donate their winnings to this? And we hit the goal, like, within a few days. We were expecting it to be, like, 2 weeks, and then, like, boom, people were really excited about it, which is awesome. So much so that we actually extended it so that we ended up donating $100,000 to charity water by, bringing in the gameplay. And so that was super exciting to me, and I really loved kind of being part of that world and making those things happen. So it's a really great experience, and I really enjoyed the time I had when I was there.
Ah, that's great. I would guess that, given how positive it was to work there, one of the reasons you might have left was just that what your vision for games may not be compatible with what Zynga is doing at the moment. Is that more or less why you ended up leaving Zynga?
There are really two things. The first was just Nevermind took off in ways that, even in my constant optimism, I didn't even expect. To see people so excited. We had been to Indiecade and SIGGRAPH and Games for Change, and it just seemed like, how could I not go for it and try to make this something that I could release? And it seemed like that was the right time to do it, and I had to try it. And the other thing too was that I was doing a long distance relationship. My husband was still in Los Angeles with his studio, and I was up in San Francisco, which was getting kind of hard to, the fact that the Southwest people knew me on a first name basis was not a good sign. So, so I was really ready to move back down and kind of, reunite with the husband and more importantly the cats down in Los Angeles.
What do the husbands and the cats think about what you're doing? Are they afraid that it's too big of a risk, or are they feeling optimistic just as you are? Is that something you have to cope with?
No, they've been fantastic. I mean, the cats are our chief sleep officers. They're on the Kickstarter page as important members of the team. So that's good, because I haven't been sleeping much, but they've been doing tons of sleeping on my behalf, which I really appreciate. It's been keeping things together. And my husband, Charlie, has been just a real trooper. He's been amazingly supportive. And in fact, he started his own studio 3 years ago, Hidden Variable Studios. And so he's been great with, kind of helping me every step of the way in terms of how do I do this studio startup thing, and being incredibly supportive. And you know, I feel so lucky, because if it weren't for, you know, his support and encouragement, and his, you know, willingness to put in late nights, you know, I probably would not have gotten as far as I have without that.
Ah, sounds like a good marriage. That's
It
great.
works out well. It works out well. You know, we met at the Game Developers Conference, which is probably a good sign, you know, for both
Sure.
geeky, and, you know, it works out very well.
Any name drops you can do for any games he's worked on? I'm curious to see what he's done.
Yeah, so their first game from Hidden Variable was a game called Bag It. It's for iOS and Android. It's a grocery bagging kind of Tetris-like game. It's a lot of fun. In fact, I do all the female vocals, so, you know, just putting that out there.
Sure.
And then they recently released a game called Tic Tactics, which is it's a strategy game that is kind of like tic-tac-toe within a tic-tac-toe board. And it's a lot of fun. It's an asynchronous multiplayer, you know, game, and yeah, I've been playing a lot of that, not just because my husband made it, but because it's also a lot of fun.
Ah, sounds pretty cool. Yeah, puzzle games, underrated in my opinion. So much you can have in that simple experience where it can feel, at least for me, more productive and more meditative. Like, I feel like puzzle games and oftentimes horror games and 2D platformers are the games where I've built the most character. Where I've had to be like, seems like an insurmountable challenge to get through Super Meat Boy or Resident Evil 4 or Tetris, and you stick with it. You find a flow state you talked about earlier. I wanted to touch on that. What did you mean by flow state, and what are you looking for when you try to enact flow state in your games? Assuming you might have tried to do that.
Yeah, I mean, flow state's definitely a sort of a mantra of game designers, you know, and it's exactly what made me think of it was when you're talking about how you want to be challenged but not taken out of the experience, not too hard, but, you know, enough to kind of keep you focused and engaged, and that's really your flow state. You know, it's funny you bring that up, because with Nevermind, one of the things that a lot of people questioned early on when I was sort of kind of throwing around the idea is like, wait a minute. So you want to create a game that gets harder the more scared and frustrated you get. Isn't that like the opposite of what you want to do as a game designer? Shouldn't it be when they get stressed out, it becomes easier so they can stay in the flow state? And I think that's really cool, that concept. I think Valve has done some play tests with their user research group, you know, along those lines, where they, I think with Left 4 Dead, like they, when the player's getting kind of stressed out, then they reduce the number of zombies, and when they're getting too relaxed, they increase the number of zombies to kind of keep them in that challenged but not overly challenged state. With Nevermind, we had a more specific goal where we wanted to, I guess, simulate life in a way where when you get stressed, rarely does life get easier. It just gets harder. You know, you lose your car keys, and now, you know, you're looking in the hamper and, you know, behind the toilet and, you know, under the couch for the keys, whereas if you just took a deep breath and looked under your nose, on the counter the whole time. And so that was really the goal with Nevermind, was to kind of simulate that, you know, things are going to get harder if you get more freaked out, so don't freak out. But it is definitely, you know, a unique approach to flow state, whereas, you know, as a game designer, typically you want something that's more kind of directed, and something that's just not too hard, not too easy.
Sure.
Engaged.
Yeah, but your intention is to have people experience stress and have them learn to deal with it even as it gets worse, which is one of the main things when I do. I try to help people who have phobias. They hate this, though. But it reminds me of Nevermind, this is the reason I bring it up. Phobias are usually an irrational, your subconscious has made some connection that something symbolizes fear of death or loss or what have you. And that gets so intense that they have been able to avoid actually experiencing it fully because, you know, let's say it's a fear of birds, you just see a bird and you leave. And you never get to the point where you actually expose yourself to the bird enough that you realize that you're going to survive if you deal with a bird. So your subconscious never learns that, and it's so terrible for them. But you have to tell them, like, you just have to hug that bird eventually, and they get so like their anxiety gets so high that they literally think they're going to die of fright. But if you're able to maintain it that for just, usually it's just a few seconds actually, they notice that their heart rate starts to go down, their level of preoccupation and fear of the object starts to go down, and they're like, I can actually survive this. And then after that, it's been demystified, and the object is no longer terrifying to them. So teaching people to stick with it sounds like is what you're going to do. You're going to get pretty scared when you play Nevermind, ideally, but if you give up, then you'll never be able to save the patient, so you need to stick with it and get your heart rate down in order to learn to not be afraid. That's what you're doing, right? That's how it sounds.
That's exactly it, yeah.
You're totally doing it. Looted Rapture asks, question for Erin, which is adorable, because no one's going to ask me questions. It's all about Erin, even though I'm talking so much. Adding on to the price of the game for additional hardware is a pretty bold move. Was this ever an issue during the initial marketing phase? Similar to XKevX question. When you had to think about marketing the thing, did you have to wait for it to be less expensive? Was that something you had to keep in mind?
No. When we first did original research and all the biofeedback options out there, there were a few things I was looking for. One was finding a sensor that measured what we call psychological arousal, which is pretty much how amped up you are, how scared or stressed you are in the case of Nevermind. And that narrowed it down to heart rate variability, which is what we use in Nevermind, or galvanic skin resistance, which is basically a sweat meter. Both of those measured it great. And then the next thing we did was, what technology out there is affordable to the consumer? What can be something that what we as student developers can get access to develop with, and also something that players can easily get a hold of and use. We tried a few things that didn't end up working well with the game, but eventually when someone introduced us to the Garmin cardio strap as an option, the light bulb went off, like, this is perfect, because it is already off the shelf. It is something that people are already getting for exercise, and can work with the game. So really that was never really a conscious part beyond that of the development. It just kind of all came together, which we're grateful for.
That's great. Every once in a while it does. And I see that my old friend Benny Disco asked the same question I did about Zynga, so thank you for asking that, Benny. Great minds think alike. That's all the questions we have at the moment. More might come in, but we only have 5 minutes or so anyway. Is there anything? Yeah, sometimes it goes fast. Almost all the time it goes fast for me. I'm always super sad when the guest is like, man, that felt like 5 hours. I'm like, oh, sorry. Every once in a while after the show I hear that. Or they just run away immediately. They don't want to talk anymore. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanted to make sure people knew with the few minutes we have?
Really, just as I said earlier, I guess for anyone tuning in now, it's really important that if you think that Nevermind's cool, if you think positive games are cool, if you think biofeedback in games are cool, please show your support on the Kickstarter page. Just search for Nevermind Kickstarter, and not only will that help us get closer to hitting our goal. The campaign closes on Thursday, so time is getting short. But it also is a vote of confidence that you think this is cool, this is something that you're interested in seeing more of in the game industry, and that will, regardless of how the Kickstarter ends up, that will help us be able to find a way to make Nevermind happen and to get it to the fully releasable state that we, our vision for it is, and go from there. So, and we appreciate all the support and encouragement that we've had so far too. The Nevermind supporters have been awesome, so big thanks to all of them too.
Absolutely, and it's something it's really important for people to know, because sadly the way Kickstarters worked, from what I've seen, when a game gets funded, then it suddenly gets all the support, because people are like, oh, well, it's going to get funded. When a game, people are not sure if it's going to get funded. Even if they want it, they just don't bother to fund it a lot of the time, like a grand majority of the time. So if they know that, let's say, Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, anyone might be more likely to pick up and publish your game or help you to publish it, if they saw that you got very close to your goal, that would make a big difference. I wonder if Garmin would want to. Exactly. That would be pretty smart of Garmin to just kind of pack it in there, give you guys a budget.
We've been having conversations. We've been having conversations. So.
Yeah, they seem like a nice company. Those video games make a lot of money these days. They might as well jump in on that.
So I hear,
So it sounds like one of the things I selfishly wanted to talk about, because it sounds like you're of like mind on this. One of the things I love about video games is that when a game is designed in a particular way, it really even if it isn't, almost always a video game, whether the developer wanted to or not, gives you the opportunity to enter their mind a little bit. Some go out of their way to allow that to happen, like Suda51 has told me, yeah, I just want people to be able to run around in my subconscious. I'm not even sure what any of this stuff means. But yeah, Killer 7, I don't know. You know, I thought of it while I was half asleep. It's you know, these are my dreams put into game for you. And that's what it sounds like you're allowing people to do in some ways with Nevermind, though it's a fictional subconscious you're inventing. So is the subconscious something that you are drawn to games for, like to enter other people's minds? And also, how did you go about trying to invent a fictional subconscious? Did you draw upon your own? Did you draw upon dreams? Did you draw upon surrealist imagery that it influenced you? Kind of a two-pronged question. Take it however you'd like.
Okay. Well, yes, is a little bit of all of the above, you know, and for me, like, Nevermind was great because my art style has always been sort of dark and surreal and creepy, and so it gave me an opportunity to bring that to life and really kind of go wild with you know, creating the most warped, twisted scenarios that I could think of, which was great. And then, you know, I worked really closely with the team. Everyone had great ideas about the narrative of Nevermind, the gameplay of Nevermind. We worked with someone who has a background in creating these amazing puzzles, and so he had a lot of input on the gameplay and the narrative, and then just trying to find ways to bring it all together. And I think one of the cool things was, as being the lead designer and the main artist on it, I could sort of have this seamless, you know, stream of creativity from game design. This is how it works. This is what I want the player to feel, and this is how it looks as well. And I think that kind of then manifests into this very, yeah, a lot of my personal art style in the game itself.
Huh, great. And are there video games that you've played, because we're just about at the end, we're in our last minute, if you wanted to do shout-outs to games that you feel are positive, games that are really interesting and that you feel like you get to explore the subconscious of the developer, any games off the top of your head you want to throw out there?
Oh, man, there's a lot of games out there, and off the top of my head, I'd have to give it more thought, because I'm blanking, and there's so many good ones out there. You know, I think I would recommend everyone check out Games for Change. There's a festival every year where they highlight some of the games, and they do a lot of great shout-outs for games doing wonderful things out there. Very diverse games, too, a little bit of everything. So I would just say go to Games for Change. They have a wonderful list there, and then just go from there. There's a lot of really great stuff happening, and I think we'll be seeing a lot more positive games out there in the years to come.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope so, too. Oh, and that Trip Hawkins game looks pretty good. Hawkins, I can never say his name. It's called If, I think. It's for teaching.
I heard a little bit about that.
Yeah, it teaches kids with difficulty reading social cues how to be empathetic. I hope that works out. He seems nice.
It's great. Yeah, I mean, USC just opened a new lab that's around interactivity and games for health and that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, it's just great. You see more and more big places and big people working on it. So I really think it's going to be part of gaming of the future, is games not just for entertainment's sake, but for a little bit more, too.
Yeah, it stands to reason. We want to be constructive with what we do. We don't want to make people feel worse. We make them feel better. It's great.
Exactly. Yeah.
You are Erin Reynolds. You can be found on Twitter on Nevermind Game.
Nevermind Games for Nevermind, and then my personal Twitter account is Reynoldsphobia, so you can also reach me there.
And that's your .com as well, right? Or is it .org?
Yep, .com. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So you can see some of the twisted art there if you dare to look at reynoldsphobia.com.
That baby! That baby you made!
But before you... Thank you. So before you go to Reynoldsphobia, go to the Kickstarter first, support it, and then you can go to the website and check out the art.
Sure, absolutely. As for me, at TronNuts on Twitter is where I can be found. We're probably going to do a Kickstarter for Sup Holmes pretty soon. I got some studio time on Wednesday. The 100th episode or so is going to be the last one of Destructoid, then we're going to Kickstarter ourselves. Thankfully, we don't have to ask for too much money because the show is not the grandest budget thing, so we'll hopefully be able to keep that going. Look for that in the future. Also, I'm working on a magazine called Nintendo Force. Got a new video going live on Monday about that, because I like Nintendo magazines. They're fun. I like Sony magazines and Microsoft magazines too, but also Nintendo. The show you can watch later on Destructoid's YouTube channel, Dtoid on YouTube, and you can listen to it just in podcast form, Sup Holmes on iTunes. Just Google it. You'll find it. I think that's about it for me. Erin, thank you so much. It was such a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to speak with you.
Oh, this was so
I'm
much
sure
fun. I appreciate it.
Any time. I don't think it'll be the last time. I expect you will be in this industry for a long time and find a great success in the process. Because you got it. I can tell.
Aw, thank
Great.
you.
Anytime. Okay. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.